All of the images you are about to see on the large screen will be generated by what's in that bag.
Hello, I am Macintosh. It sure is great to get out of that bag.
Apple really was great at selling a feeling rather than trying to sell people a device.
I think Apple was selling lifestyle and they were selling identity.
The Macintosh introduced a graphical user interface that allowed you to see things on the screen, control it with a mouse, and this was groundbreaking. Like many typical tech companies, started in a garage in Cupertino, California by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. And their goal was to create a computer that people could just use. There was nothing you could buy that just worked out of the box and gave you the ability to do things computers promised. And that was what they were trying to achieve.
Sometimes it's easy to forget just how business-focused computers were during the 1970s. And so what Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, I think, really latched onto was the idea that, yeah, there was a big market for computers in business, but that there would be a much bigger market for computers if they were able to achieve that sense of really helping people do more with their lives. And they really wanted to focus on the idea of computers as a creative thing.
It was a very niche thing to have a computer in the 70s. Apple were like, we're bringing it to the people.
I think a really key distinction about what Apple was doing differently to everybody else in the 1970s was that idea that they felt that both the hardware and the software had to work together perfectly. And so right from the beginning, they wanted to make sure they controlled the software and they controlled the hardware and brought the two things together to really be as perfect as a pairing as they could.
If you know how to point, you already know how to use it.
What Apple did differently is that they centered the human in the experience. So they led with the experience of the computer as opposed to the spec.
They were thinking about the person who would buy the device and how they would use it. Anyone that's an Apple user at heart will argue that their products are simply easy to use, and that focus really mattered. And the Macintosh computer, when you turned it on, it just worked, and it was probably easy to navigate the things you wanted to do.
Have you ever heard Apple explain the specs of a computer or a device or a phone in an ad? They never do. And I think even back from those early days, it just wasn't part of it. They really wanted to sell the idea of what a computer could be.
Even in recent years, the iPhone commercials on billboards, there's not a selling point. It doesn't tell you the speed, the specs, the battery life. It just shows you a photo and says shot on iPhone. I mean, many companies wouldn't even consider doing that.
So Apple were taking computers from something that was just for work and they made it category changing, your life, music.
It was just about that idea of the freedom of dancing around with a pair of earbuds in. It had nothing to do with how many gigabytes of memory. Instead, they said 1,000 songs in your pocket. It was just such a simple way to sell the idea of what that would mean for your life.
Take my hand and come with me because you look so fine that I really want to make you mine.
So there's no doubt the biggest challenge that Apple had was losing Steve Jobs.
After the launch of the original Macintosh, they really did have actually quite a hard time for a couple of years there. And Steve Jobs left the company, the board of directors pushed him out.
They lost that focus on the end user and they just focused on products, like everyone else was doing.
They really were on the brink in 1997. They at one point were apparently just 90 days away from bankruptcy. But they also then took an investment from Microsoft. So Microsoft actually saved Apple back in that time and put $150 million into the company.
It's the most phenomenal story that they spent the huge amount of money to bring Steve Jobs back by buying the company that he went on to create. What Steve Jobs did when he came back was refocus them straight back into, we've got too many products, narrow the lineup and focus on the end user. And that's where your iMac, which is essentially the long-term vision of Steve's original Mac.
It's not just about the minimal aesthetic, which is beautiful, but it's really an ecosystem and something that they live by in every single area. They're constantly looking at like, what can we take away? Where other companies are like, what can we add? What features can we add? What can we do?
It's hard to argue with the Steve Jobs philosophy, which, by the way, is still deeply ingrained in that company today.
But actually 2007 was the moment when they changed the name of the company from Apple Computers to just Apple. And so in some ways they knew where they were going next at the time. And of course the iPad followed soon after the iPhone. And we started to really enter that era where it was about a range of these devices that were no longer about needing a keyboard in front of you.
It's not about a tool, but it's about creativity. What can you do with that tool? You're capturing your toddler's first steps. You're creating a home video. Whatever it is that you're doing, it's about creative expression. It's about self-identity.
There's a desirability they created in their company and their products, and there's a hype around it. I've spoken to many people in those queues outside Apple stores, and you speak to them because they want the experience. They want the experience of the cheering of the staff, and it doesn't happen anywhere else.
Apple isn't just a product, it's a feeling. I think if you look back over the last 50 years, the tech has changed, the world has changed, marketing and advertising has changed, but the feeling you have for Apple is the same now as it was then.
And that's where I think, as much as we have these real breakout moments along the way, and I think certainly, the iMac, the iPod, and the iPhone as that sort of 10-year window where the real revolution took place, I think it was that underlying philosophy of making sure that tech serves humanity that I think really was the moment where they changed the world.
Because if our vision and concepts are right, today will be the beginning of an alternative to IBM's vision of the office, an alternative that starts with people rather than mainframes.